Okay. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's event. Let's talk about it. Disclosure in the Workplace, hosted by Multicultural Student Live, LASSO, and then partnered with the Center for Career Development and Academic Exploration. If you see this person on the screen, that's Luis. He's going to talk later, so he's just chilling out. But we'll go ahead and get started with an overview, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the evening. Yes. Okay, so overview of tonight's program, checking in food. If at any time you're like, man, I'm still hungry, please go get another plate. There's tons to eat. If you need a drink, you need to go to the bathroom, just go ahead and do what you got to do. LASSO's going to give an introduction before we get into things. We'll do some community norms just to make sure that we set up a safe and intentional space. And then we'll get into our keynote speaker. We'll do some additional questions and talk about some upcoming events. But with that, I'll go ahead and let LASSO do a nice little introduction.
You want me to go up there?
Yes,
You
please.
can, yeah.
So you can get the microphone so it'll pick up on the screen.
Hey, my name is Ricardo. I'm the president of LASSO, and yeah, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Kimberly. I'm the event manager for LASSO.
Yeah, so we are the Latin American student organization, and basically what we do is just try to bring our culture together and let other people learn and, you know, learn about our culture and respect it essentially. But yeah, some events we have coming up would be one this Thursday, which is Vala Avenida, where we'll have other Latin organizations come in and also represent their table, as well as we'll have free food, music. It's just a way to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, essentially. And then next week after that, LASSO's having like an In Casita event, which is like an in-house retreat. And it's like more of a bonding kind of thing or event. And that should be good as well. But also on October 6th, the UT Soccer reached out to LASSO to collaborate on for one of the lady ball games. And so LASSO will be there. They'll be giving out free shirts. There'll be food. And yeah, I think that's a lot of things.
Thank you guys.
And we'll get started with some community norms. The reason we are one up here using a microphone and two recording is just to make this presentation accessible after today. We know a lot of people work to provide for themselves to help support their family. So for folks that can't be here, this will be accessible. So resource sharing never stops, and this could never be contained to just an hour. So we'll make sure we post it and have that information out. We wanted to set a few community norms. So what is shared here stays here, but what's learned here leaves here. So we're going to share and apply lessons and resources outside of tonight, but not the stories shared. We can never fully tell one other person's story to justice, so we let them do that. Instead, we only share our story with who we're comfortable with. We're going to have a commitment to dialogue rather than debate or discussion. We like to root in dialogue because dialogue's focused in wanting to know more about it, learning other people's perspective, where debate is ingrained and rooted in someone being right, and discussion is asking the question why, because we know children love to ask why, and you can tell them the scientific reason behind the sky is blue and they're still gonna be like, cool, why? And you're like, awesome, great. So we just like to be a commitment to dialogue rather than debate or discussion. And then the last one is recognize we are all in different places in our journey. So we're just acknowledging that we're not all at the same point. We're all at different places, and we wanna say that we're glad you showed up. We're glad we're here together, and we're gonna keep on learning, and just know that maybe the person next to you is not as far forward as you are, or they might be more far forward than you. And we're just honoring that you're in the space, and we're glad you're here tonight. Is there any others that we would like to add for this evening, or we feel comfortable with this list? Feel good? Awesome. Okay, then I have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Luis Mata. Luis uses he, him, and L pronouns. He serves as a policy coordinator at the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugees Rights Coalition. Please bear with me. Been a long day and given several presentations, so I feel like I'm going to jumble things. Luis is a first generation graduate from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, born in Guadalajara, Mexico. As a former undocumented immigrant, he is committed to his work for advocating for dignified and free migration and fighting to and fighting against, yes, all acts of oppression towards marginalized communities. After graduating from PSTCC, Luis went on to earn his bachelor's degree in political science at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. During his time at UTK, he was awarded the Beacon of Change Award, the highest award conferred by and for students. Additionally, had the honor of co-founding Students for Migrant Justice at the University of Tennessee, a student organization committed to building the bridge between campus and the Knoxville community to actively center and build power amongst students and community members for the fight for migrant justice and freedom of mobility. Luis was the Victims of Crime Assistant at the Office of Immigration Services, providing immigration relief for victims of criminal activity. He is currently in the capacity as policy coordinator at the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, monitoring the legislative process for potential impacts on our immigrant and refugee communities at the local, state, and federal levels. So at this point, I'm going to stop my screen share, turn it over to Luis, and he's going to share on his end.
Yes, thank you so much, Heather, Ali, the incredible MSL team, and all of you. I can't see you all, but y'all are amazing, and I'm so happy to be here with you all, and it's truly an honor to come back and to a space that gave me so much in my time at UT, and I'm so incredibly excited for this conversation. And yeah, as Heather so eloquently said, please, whenever we give presentations, we really love to make it as engaging and interactive as possible. So if there are at any point any questions, concerns, please feel free to, or just anything that y'all want to add, please feel free to do so. So now I will share my screen with you all. Don't look at the tabs.
I'm the same way. Don't worry about it.
Oh my gosh, it hurts. It hurts me. But yeah, so basically, my name is Luis Mata. I am the policy coordinator at TIRC, the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition. And essentially what our organization does is that, our commitment is to build power with immigrant and refugee communities all across the state towards creating communities that are rooted in, welcoming everybody and creating opportunities for folks to thrive in Tennessee. Now, the policy team, what we do is we basically lead and implement all of our campaigns and advocacy. And again, really building that bridge between our communities and, institutions and people in positions of power, and making sure that our community's voices are heard and centered where in places where decisions are being made, right, as it should be. So basically, just a quick recap of what we're going to talk about today is just kind of, a very brief overview on immigration and talking about a few terms here and there. What is DACA, right? The current state of DACA, we'll get to that as well. And also talking a little bit about the climate, specifically the political climate in Tennessee and how that looks, for immigrants and refugees. And then in addition to that, just kind of talking about one of the big victories that we got this year, which is super important, for folks in positions like educators or even students or folks who are among, students who might be eligible for this. That is an awesome opportunity for you all to also, as Heather was mentioning, to take what you learn and really disseminate towards community members. So yeah, that sounds good with all of you. I will go ahead and kick it off with this quote right here. Now, this is a question for the crowd. I'm happy to read this, unless Heather, you want to read it, but basically, while I'm speaking, uttering these words from this quote, please keep in mind, who do you think said this, right? So immigration to this country is increasing and is making its greatest relative increase from races most alien to the body of the American people and from the lowest and most illiterate classes among those races, most of whom represent the rudest form of labor, are very difficult to assimilate and do not promise well for the standard of civilization in the US. They have no interest or stake in the country, and they never become American citizens. Who can tell me who said these words?
Someone said, I want to say it's Trump, but he didn't speak that eloquently. So
That is not the first time we've gotten that response, by the way. So great job.
that was also your guess. Yeah.
Maybe he's on the brain, you know, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe it's
So I'm hearing Donald Trump. What else was said?
it was a lot of group like, yeah, Trump. So
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
So okay, that is interesting, right? Because the person who said this was a representative from Massachusetts in 1891, talking about Italians and Eastern Europeans. So what does that tell us, right? That tells us that, first and foremost, that, first and foremost, it's the fact that we've seen this throughout history of the United States, right? We've seen anti-immigrant narrative rhetoric for years, for decades, right? And a lot of folks tend to believe that it is, a result of the Trump era administration. And the reality is that anti-immigrant sentiments existed long before Donald Trump, right? Or any other things that we're seeing recently with, the governors in Texas and Florida, right? So what does this say, right? This says that, these anti-immigrant, anti-Black and brown communities, rhetoric and narratives have existed and are deeply rooted in the history of the United States, right? So this also tells us, right, that the term immigrant, the term legal, the term illegal, right, those are all, they're not based on what's fair. They're not based on what is just. It is just based on who is in power, right? And who is the group that is on the receiving end of these narratives, right? So keeping that in mind throughout the presentation, and how this anti-immigrant and oppressive white supremacist arms take place in not only in what we see on the surface level, but what is deeper than that, and what is the creation of these entire systems as a whole that are operating. A lot of times we hear when people talk about ICE or whatever, that they're entities that are going rogue and all this stuff, and the reality is that they're not, right? They are operating exactly how they were designed to operate. So with that being said, who can tell me what ICE is? And again, I'm not gonna do this like a super, what is that? But like I do want to make this interactive and engaging. So if there is anybody in the crowd who would like to say, what ICE is, what ICE does, what you've heard about ICE, or any of the terms that you see on the screen, CBP, asylee refugee, undocumented, or DACA.
Someone said I stands for Immigrant and Custom Enforcement. Question mark. Question mark.
Yes, great job. And what does that mean? So what does that tell us? What does ICE do?
Deport people.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so basically, ICE, I am now, how old am I now? I am 8 years older than ICE, right? So what does that mean? That tells us that we've existed in times without ICE. I existed without ICE until I was 8 years old, right? And we can live in a world without ICE, right? So without this, system that is continuously, trying to detain and deport our community members just because of a lack of a piece of paper, right? And that is seen, all across the country. That is seen in our state. That is seen in our local communities. In Knoxville, there is the 287G program. I'll talk a little bit about that. But basically these avenues, the way that we kind of describe it is that there are multiple type of tentacles to the ICE machine, right? And a lot of these tentacles include, detention centers, these contracts between local and federal law enforcement agencies, right? And several different type of wheels that keep this turning, right? And the same goes for CBP. And, our role, as part of this movement and as people who are interested in hearing about the movement is to get more people involved in this to start slowly chipping away at that system, right? Moving on to the next one, CBP. Who can tell me what that is?
Customs and Border Patrol.
Yes, that's exactly right. So tell me what CBP does.
Make sure people don't cross the border.
That is exactly right. So CBP stands for Custom and Border Protection. So yeah, kind of a little misnomer there, right? Like what are they actually protecting? You know what I mean? But yeah, that's exactly right. They are at the borders and they regularly have like a 100-mile radius within the borders to enforce. And again, when we saw recent occasions of CBP officers going outside of their little realm, we heard a lot of people saying they're not allowed to do that. They're going rogue. And again, going back to the thing, that was state sanctioned, right? They are doing what they are capable of doing, right? Whether that's adhering to the law or not, right? They will do whatever it is that they want to do. Now, these, especially ICE, came after the attacks at 9/11, right? That is what under the Bush administration was created to quote unquote stop terrorist attacks, right? As a result of that is how we've seen, as I mentioned earlier, right, anti-immigrant sentiments go back history, but as a result of 9/11 was when we saw an increased and exacerbated attack towards Muslim communities, but all immigrant and refugee communities as a whole, right, as seen as other, right, and that we were all just here to take, essentially, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about like debunking all of that, but who can tell me what an asylee or a refugee is, or the rest of the terms? Who can tell me what those are? Any of those: asylee, refugee, undocumented, DACA.
So I think asylum and refugee is asylum is maybe somebody seeking asylum, or there's sought asylum, and refugee. Refugee that has found refuge in this country.
Do you hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So wait, what was the answer to the refugee part? I didn't quite get that one.
Somebody seeking refuge, or that has found refuge.
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you to whoever said that. Yes, that's exactly right. So basically, an asylee and a refugee are folks who are exercising their legal right to come to seek safety in the United States, right? The only difference between both of those is that an asylee is somebody who is seeking safety in the US at the border, right, presenting themselves to the CBP. And, both of these categories, asylee and refugee, are people who have been persecuted based on, a numerous of things, whether that's gender, religion, political association, whatever that might be. But yeah, an asylee is somebody who is presenting themselves in the United States. A refugee is somebody who is seeking safety abroad, right? So like in their home country. Undocumented, that is a term for folks who might not meet the legal side of, what is deemed to be somebody here with a authorization to do so, right? DACA. Who can tell me what DACA is?
Very actually capital or.
What was that?
Deferred action childhood arrival.
Yes, that's exactly right. So DACA is deferred action for childhood arrivals, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. But real quick, I definitely wanted to talk about, what does that mean, right? With all of these terms, with all of these conversations happening, how does that look at home, right? So basically what we've been seeing is that Tennessee is a place where folks want to come here, they want to join their families, they want to start their businesses, they want to work here, right? It's what's called a new destination state, basically meaning that it has one of the highest growing immigrant and refugee populations, and especially over the last few decades, what we saw, and normally we don't like to zero in on a certain demographic, but celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, the Hispanic population in 2020 to 2021 increased by 4%. And in the coming 20 years, it's expected to make up 10% of the state's total population, right? So what does that mean? That means that should act as a flare, right, for policymakers, decision makers, electeds, to truly invest in immigrant and refugee communities, right? But also on the flip side, what that does is that it creates these tensions, these anxieties that arise as a result of these, changing demographics, right? And that's exactly what we're seeing. I don't know how many folks present follow, immigration related news, but what's happening in Texas and Florida with the governors there, busing and sending out folks from, uprooting them from their communities is a direct result of that. And it's a direct result of, what we, the theory of scarcity, right? Which is kind of what I was hinting at earlier, is this idea that, only some folks are eligible to receive certain resources, right? And if not, again, this idea of scarcity that, the more people here, these resources only exist for a select few and leave some out. And what have we seen is that, of course, right, the people who are deserving are the white people or the people who are white adjacent, as opposed to Black and brown communities, right? And, this basically is where this saying comes in, right? Narratives shape policies, right? So the way that, us as an organization, the way that you all, to your friends, your families, there at the space in MSL, right? Like the way that you all are talking about certain things, the way you're framing things, the messaging that you're using, those narratives, change the public's perception of things, right? And through that is how policy is created, right? Now that can be negative and positive, right? And because of that, we always say, no administration, no party will ever save us, right? A lot of folks try to really hype up the Obama administration because of his implementation of DACA, right? But the reality is that his nickname was the deporter in chief, right? Because of how, the deportations were the highest they've ever been under his administration. So again, we say, no administration or party will ever save us. We are the ones that are going to save ourselves. How? By having these conversations. And as Heather was saying, taking this out with you, right? And, of course, when we organize, we win. So diving a little bit deeper into DACA. Again, somebody mentioned it's deferred action for childhood arrivals. So what does that mean? Can somebody tell me, what does that mean? What benefits are there? Who's eligible? Who can tell me a little bit more about DACA? If you know anybody with DACA, again, I'm not, or if you've heard stories, experiences, what are some things that y'all have heard about DACA?
Yeah, go ahead.
My two older siblings are on Malta.
Yeah.
I don't really know much about it, other than like, they're able to get a job. I know they have a lot of, like, for example, I know I get like state tuition and stuff like that. They still know, like, that's how it is. It's not like maybe it's still good for them.
Yeah.
But I guess that's how they're working.
Did you hear that, Luis?
I did not. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. So they said their two older siblings are on DACA. So it's like able for them to get jobs, but their two older siblings didn't get in-state tuition and they do. So they're like, it's not amazing, but
Exactly. That's exactly right. So DACA, thanks to decades of organizing from directly impacted community members, they pushed and pushed, and eventually the Obama administration in 2012 implemented DACA through an executive order. So basically what that means is that this program allows, at the time it was immigrant youth who were brought here to the US to be able to go to school, essentially, right? So that means that, they were provided with a work permit to work and provided them with temporary protections from deportation. Through that, they were able to obtain a driver's license, social security number. Now, you said it perfectly. The DACA program was never enough. It has never been enough, and it never will be enough. Folks with DACA have to renew every 2 years, and it is temporary, right? It is basically a 2-year. What did I see that? Like a 2-year subscription to the US, right? Like a 2-year season pass to the US. Also in this line of work, you just have to like be, I don't know, you have to try to be funny as much as you possibly can, or else you, but yeah, a 2-year subscription to the US is essentially what this is. And you could lose it at any time. And we continue to see how right now we just celebrated the 10th year of 10-year anniversary of the DACA program. And instead of, celebrating, it was more of like, hey, we have a Democratic administration, what is going on? Why are we not provided with what you ran your campaign on, right? Why are we not having permanent protections yet? So yeah, there are so many faults with the DACA program. And again, after 10 years of legal battles, DACA recipients living court case to court case, they continue to live in limbo. And I'll talk a little bit more on like the current state of DACA. But yeah, it is, they're living court case to court case. And as you were mentioning, I was a former DACA recipient, and basically what that did was where I had to take only one class a semester for like 5 years, right? So by the time that my colleagues from, or my classmates in high school were graduating college, I had 1 semester under my belt, right? Because of the fact that that was all I could afford, because the alternative was to pay out-of-state tuition without in-state or without any type of federal financial assistance. And that is the reality for close to 800,000 individuals across the country and more than 7,000 in the state of Tennessee, right? So we're seeing that these are people who are colleagues, our coworkers, our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, parents. At this point, so many DACA recipients are now in their 30s, right? A lot of times you see in the movement that you say, you hear people say, immigrant youth, and it's the fact that some of these folks are like 40, you know what I mean? And it's like they're not immigrant youth anymore. They're people who have families and are still living with the uncertainty of what is going to happen tomorrow, right? So now focusing in a little bit more on the protections, right? And this is right here is where I'll kind of give like an update on like the current state of where we're at with DACA. Because now more than ever, it is so important for institutions, for businesses to understand what's at stake and understand what protections exist for us to keep moving forward, right? So basically the current state of DACA is that it is, in 2017, the Trump administration basically ended DACA, right? But the courts basically said, you did that unlawfully, so we're going to continue to investigate and see what happens. So since 2017 until now, there have not been any basically any new DACA recipients who have been able to benefit from DACA because of that. So what does that mean? That still means that 800,000 plus folks have it, 7,000 plus folks in Tennessee have it. But basically what happened was that now it finally got to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, right? That is currently where DACA is at right now. So now, what they're arguing in the Fifth Circuit Court is the legality of the entire DACA program, right? So is it lawful? Is it unlawful? And whatever they rule is what will happen to DACA, right? Now, the thing is that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is a completely anti-immigrant court. So we're expecting this decision to be a negative decision. We're expecting it to happen, within the coming weeks. So I'm glad that we were able to, I was able to come and chat with you all now. But basically, the thing is that by the end of the year, the DACA program could no longer be in existence anymore, right? So that is where we come in, right? That is where we come in to build the solidarity, build coalition, of course, through an intersectional lens, recognizing the fact that this is a collective effort, right? And that we all must be willing to throw down with one another, because that is when we win, right? So with that being said, right, so what's going to happen to people, whether they currently have DACA or if they become undocumented, right? So currently there are protections for undocumented and DACA recipients, right? So what do these protections include? There's a lot of workers, like worker rights, that apply to them just as much as they apply to anybody else who's a worker, right? And that's the bottom line, like plain and simple. Federal law says that, regardless of your citizenship status or, your work eligibility, undocumented workers are protected as much as any other worker, right? So if you are an undocumented worker, you have employment right, no matter what your citizenship status says, and that is directly coming from the Immigration and Nationality Act, right? Which is like I don't know, how can I describe it? It's basically like your syllabus, right? Kind of, is that similar?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So it's kind of like your syllabus. It's like the all-encompassing thing that guides everything immigration related, right? So essentially what it says is that it's illegal to discriminate against any worker based on their immigration status. However, a lot of employers argue, that since undocumented workers do not have, federally authorized work permits or federally authorized eligibility to work, that they are not legally employees, right? And because of that, they cannot access things like workers' comp and stuff like that, right? But again, as federal law says, any worker, regardless of immigration status, is bound and eligible for any protections that exist, right? So now going into a little bit about workers' compensation, right? That is, that's a huge topic, especially over here in Nashville. We've seen countless of workers' comp claims, with the construction that is literally happening every single second in downtown. A lot of that is being done by, migrants, right? And a lot of times, they might have mixed statuses, so, whatever it is, but there are a lot of times, and it's no secret that undocumented workers are exploited for their labor more than their counterparts, right? So basically, taking the COVID-19 crisis, right? While our federal government was slow to, recognize the humanity of all workers, our local communities were ready and were at the forefront, ready to deliver, whatever it was that, like a needs assessment, right? Why? Because when it comes to workers' comp, it's a little bit tricky. And just it's really like case by case basis, depending on what the law states in each state. So really, it's a case by case basis, right, on how workers' comp applies. But again, going back to this, right, like for example, whenever COVID-19, whenever we would get the stimulus checks, undocumented individuals were not included in that, right? Even though undocumented people, DACA recipients, were the ones that were keeping this country afloat, right? And while that was the case, our local communities, local organizations stepped up and said, hey, like these are some awesome organizations in Knoxville, like AKIN, Allies for Knoxville's Immigrant Neighbors, were putting funds together to disperse them during the pandemic, right? So it's again, I go back to like this, that's the importance of creating this solidarity, this movement together in community with one another, because that is how we make each other safe, right, and healthy. Now another thing, unionizing. Who can tell me what a union is or what unionizing means?
Yeah.
Collaborative grant formed by labor.
Do you hear that?
I did not.
You said a collaborative,
Like grant formed by like labor.
yeah, like born by labor. So like a collaborative like group born by labor.
Yes, exactly. Wow, that was awesome. I love that. Yeah, exactly. So basically, if you create a union in the workplace, you are creating the opportunity to get better things, better pay, better benefits, have a stronger voice in your workplace, right? Now, here's the thing. While a majority of undocumented people are like, I hate going back to like the legality part of it, but undocumented workers, by law do not have the legal authorization to work in the US, but some DACA recipients, or all DACA recipients, are eligible to have work permits, right? However, despite the uncertainty around their futures as workers in the United States, many of them are leading the fight for unionizing their workplaces, right? And that is so important because the labor rights movement is seeing a huge shift from being a very, very white space to being migrant-led, right? So the migrant justice movement is using the tactics, the strategies that have won big things, right, to the labor organizing space, right? And again, what is that doing? That is putting Black and brown voices at the forefront. That is putting under-resourced, marginalized communities at the forefront of issues that are impacting all of us. There's that one saying that says, we're not, I don't know the exact, don't quote me, right? But it's like, we're not in like single issue struggles because we don't live single issue lives, right? That is exactly the case here. And that's exactly why in our organizing efforts and in movement spaces, it's so important to think of it in an intersectional lens. And that is the case here, right? We say migrant justice is labor justice, is climate justice, is racial justice, right? And that is true in this setting here. And again, going back to the pandemic, right? While we hate, tying things back into like contribution equals your value, you know what I mean? We saw how our communities, our undocumented communities, DACA recipients stepped up and led our country, right? So without further ado, all this to say, right, our communities are stronger and healthier when everyone has equal access to opportunities to thrive. And that is what happened this year. So Turk has its C4 political arm, which is Turk Vote, which does a lot more of the political work, building a pro-immigrant, pro-refugee political landscape and political infrastructure across the state. And we're constantly, lobbying at the state legislature. We've defeated more than 250 anti-immigrant bills and continuing to hold the line every single year. But this year we made history by passing the first proactive piece of legislation at the state legislature, which is the professional licenses. So basically what this did, we'd have stories of folks coming to us and saying, hey, like, I am a DACA recipient. I've gone through so many obstacles to obtain my nursing degree, my social work degree, right? And however, I am being met by the state law that says that because I'm not a citizen, or because I'm not on a pathway to citizenship, I am not eligible to obtain my professional license to practice in that field, right? We saw this as a huge issue, not only like morally, but also like we were in the height of the pandemic, we still are, but I mean, we were in the huge like labor shortage, all that, and we're like, there's literally so many people that want to work, right? And they're being barred by this law. So we led a campaign directly created and led by people directly impacted. We went to the state legislature. We got our sponsors in the House and the Senate side, and we moved it through, and we passed the bill. And now we can say that it is a law in the state of Tennessee. So what this does is basically it says that anybody who has a work permit can now access their professional licenses. And that goes from being a barber, nurse, social worker, bartender, physical therapist, anything in the state of Tennessee that requires a license, they can now benefit from the law. And this includes close to, as I mentioned, 7,000 plus DACA recipients, 3,000 TPS holders, asylum seekers, any type of immigration status that has a work permit, they are now eligible to get their driver's licenses. Or no, that is the next bill that coming, get their professional license. That is the end of the presentation. Basically, the reason that I wanted to add that professional license piece there is that, while our federal government is slow to, enact bold, swift policies that positively impact immigrant and refugee communities, we know that our local and state governments have the resources and funds and tools to be able to invest in immigrant and refugee communities, right? And we must continue building solidarity with one another to keep pushing for that, especially right now with the uncertainty of a lot of things, different movements, spaces, right? It's important for all of us to join in coalition and continue this work in a sustainable manner. Any questions, any discussion, dialogue, anything at all? I know we are probably running short on time here, and I definitely want to be mindful of y'all's time, but and again, if there is no time for that, please send me an email, call me, text me, whatever it is. I'm happy to answer any questions. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities here at Turk and Turk Votes. Please come out, hang out with us, and get involved.
Do you have time for a question? Because I saw a hand raised.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Any questions at all, please?
Yeah, I was wondering if there were any current initiatives that you had going on, specifically for the state of Tennessee, or even for Knoxville.
Do you mean to repeat that?
Please, if you would be so kind.
Yeah. So is there any current initiatives that are going on, whether it's in Tennessee or Knoxville, to kind of gain support and kind of what y'all are doing and what we can do?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. Again, just differentiating the two. Turk is our, we have Turk and Turk Votes, right? Turk Votes is the more political side, is our political arm. But with both, we have campaigns and advocacy efforts on both sides, right? Right now, currently with the November 8th elections coming up, we're definitely doing a lot of door knocking. That is like one of our biggest campaigns, is just expanding our political landscape across the state. So we definitely have opportunities for you all to join us in shifting the tide in Tennessee. But also, January is right around the corner, and that is when the session starts. And we're going to be there every single day. We always, as I mentioned, we always want to make sure that we're including our directly impacted voices while we're there speaking with people who are making decisions. So please make sure to, join us in that. I will also say, the folks at MSL are incredible. Get involved with them as much as you can. I know that I wouldn't be in the place that I am today without Heather and all the incredible people out there. Also Students for Migrant Justice, like shout out to you all out there doing the work in the communities, maybe. They have so many cool initiatives happening, a few things happening in the coming weeks, so definitely get involved with them. They also have direct communication with a lot of us over here, so when things continue, when our campaigns continue to take off, we're currently doing that, but also, when new initiatives come out, we'll stay in touch with us and we'll definitely get y'all involved.
You're the best. Did you have a question?
I was thinking about how this views like DACA and undocumented, like laborists and like unionizing people, like how do you think that's gonna impact labor rights as a whole?
Yeah, so this whole movement with like unionizing and DACA and labor rights, like how do you think this is going to impact just like labor rights and like the like workforce like in general? Is that like a good summation? Okay, great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So right now what we're seeing, that's a great question, is the way that labor rights and labor organizing is really shifting to include more voices that didn't have a place at the table, right? Those people that didn't have a space at the table were the ones that were amongst the most exploited in the workplace, right? And now with these voices, and again, this goes back, this is like history, right? Like labor and migrant work have been together in solidarity for years. But, one thing is, Cesar Chavez, we hear about him all the time, a huge labor organizer. However, what he would do is that he would call the INS at the time, which was the old ICE, right? He would call the ICE on undocumented workers, right? Because when it comes to strikes and stuff like that, the undocumented workers were the ones that were taking those jobs when people would go on strike, right? So while there's so much solidarity there's a lot of tension that goes back in history, right? And right now what we're seeing is how people are starting to really see that intersectional aspect of it and say, oh, hey, like this is going to benefit me, this is going to benefit you, but not only that, it's going to benefit all of our movements, right? And that is where we're going towards right now. That is the future that we're seeing and envisioning right now, is a future where we recognize the fact that what is good for me is also good for you, but it's good for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And there's an incredible article. It's by Prism. Her name is Tina Vasquez, and it talks about how exactly that, right? It's talking about how the labor organizing is now turning into migrant-led labor organizing. It's incredible. You should check it out. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Are there any others before Luis has to wrap up? Okay, one more. Luis, are you good?
Yes, definitely.
Labor question again, how do we better support those in laborers who are organizing, who are doing all of this, while also recognizing that their basic needs are being met as well?
Yeah.
That's a huge issue with like crossing to get on and so on.
Yeah, so this just dives more into the labor question. So like, how do we continue to support those like at the forefront who are doing the work while also making sure that their basic needs are met? So like crossing the picket line and things of that nature, just making sure that like, how do we further support them in their work?
How to further support the labor rights or labor organizing?
If your basic needs aren't met, you're more likely to cross.
Yeah, so yes, and so it's like if your basic needs aren't met, you're more likely to cross. So like, how do we just keep on advocating and fighting the fight and making sure that we're addressing that while in the movement?
That's a great question. So I think as a movement, you have to recognize that, especially when it comes to the picket line and crossing that and basic needs, right? It's the fact that, the reason that there is a picket line there is because somebody's basic needs were not being met. You know what I mean? So in order for more basic needs to be met, you have to be educated and engaged in these movements, right? And in these different efforts that are existing in different campaigns that are going on all around us, to make sure that we all understand the efforts that we're all putting in. You know what I mean? Because and you see this all the time, you know, with gatekeeping in our different movement spaces. You know what I mean? It's a lot of competition, right? So there's a lot of competition that exists, you know, and even in such like small examples, right? Like if the migrant justice organizations have a action this day, but the labor rights haven't organized, you know, or the central labor councils, you know, stuff like that. And it's about building that coalition, you know. And for example, here in Nashville, we have the Nashville Justice League. So that is made up of us, right? Immigrants and refugees. It's made up of the Equity Alliance, you know, Black leaders that are, you know, shifting the tide in Tennessee. And it's also made up of SEIU and the Central Labor Councils, right? So that is where, you know, as a movement, and also with the migrant justice movement, it's about including, you know, like the race class narrative, and making sure that we're understanding the fact that, like, you know, I am an immigrant, I am a working class immigrant, you know, I am several identities, you know what I mean? And that is why it's so important to understand these movements in through that intersectional lens that I was mentioning. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. And I know you could talk on this for hours and hours, but you told me you have a previous engagement, so we're going to honor that. But can we thank Luis for spending his time here?
Thank you all. Seriously, thank you so much.
Luis, thank you so much. I'll send you the YouTube link when it's posted. And then if we have additional questions, anyone can stick around after and I'll make sure he gets them.
Yeah, absolutely. And please feel free to email me, text me, whatever it is. I'm happy to have conversations with anybody about this. And as I mentioned, we have several entry points here. So please don't hesitate to reach out and get involved with us, MSL, SMJ, all the awesome organizations that are over there as well. So thank you all again so much.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Perfect. All right, we'll finish up because I know we are hot and pressed for time. I'm going to make sure we honor your time. So there are additional questions. Luis touched on a lot of these. So if there are any questions that you have unanswered, there's a QR code at the end that has like a community share of different websites and how to answer these questions. And if you need any protections, because if you told me to remember everything in an hour, so we want to make sure that we have that time. If you have any questions, please feel free to stick around. If I don't know the answer, we'll make sure that Luis's contact is given out. Again, he's a super personable person, so he wants to talk with everyone. And then we just have a few upcoming events, both from the Center for Career Development and LASSO. So like LASSO said, Val Avenida is this Thursday out on the FBCC Plaza from 6 to 8. Do you want to say more about that or anything like that?
LASSO, do you have any more information that we need to know about Val Avenida?
No, come out, there's gonna be free food, the tables there, will also be fundraising, students and migrant justice will be there.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know, kind of throw organizations like SHIP, Society of Hispanic Engineers gonna be there. The Latin sorority and the fraternity will be there.
Yeah.
As well as banners.
Yeah.
So they'll be there too, they'll be fundraising. But there'll also be free food. And it's just a time to like celebrate, dance, there'll be music.
We love it. Yeah, a good community event to find more organizations to get more involved. And then 2 things coming up for the CCGAE. If you ever need help, job questions, searching, discussing employers, please feel free to reach out to me. This Thursday is Prepare for the Fair. So if you need a LinkedIn headshot, we got a whole photo booth for free. Please come out and use it. Yes, stop by, Dean of Students, please come on over. We do resume reviews, we do everything. You can meet with us, you can meet with an employer to review over those. And then there's a job fair next week. There's 3 days. There's engineering and STEM on the first day, supply chain management on the second day, and then business, retail, and government on the third day. But if you have any questions, jobs, internship, shadowing, please feel free to reach out. I would love to get you connected and make sure that we find you a great place after your time at UT.
Heather, can you remind folks where they can find a copy of this recording along with the QR code to these external links?
Yeah, so the QR code is going to be at the end of this presentation, and this presentation both will be linked on the Center for Career Development's website along with our YouTube page. So the additional resources will be there. It'll be a collective, so they'll keep growing. And if you have any resources that you'd like to share, please feel free and reach out to me. It's a growing list. It's ever changing. So we want to make sure that it's accessible, that's again, you can find it on our website at career.utk.edu and find some of these resources here. It should be available for anyone, and it's a growing list. Thank you so much.